All right, welcome everyone to the panel. Thank you so much for being here today. We're here to talk about creating and maintaining the Lord of the Rings online. As we said, we will be talking about the joys and challenges of doing so. That's things like narrative, story development, keeping the game updated long-term, localization, the importance of having a lore keeper, translating the world of Middle-earth into an expansive world, and more. So we really appreciate you being here with us today for DevCom. Let me start by introducing our panelists. First, to my right here is Marcy Brown, our Senior Localization Coordinator.
Hi, it's fantastic to be here. We're all excited to talk to you today.
To Marcy's right is our lead world builder, Chris Pierson.
Hi, I'm sorry Jason Pierce couldn't make it today. there was a bit of a mess up in the names up on the screen beforehand, but yeah, I'm in fact Chris.
Now, you've actually been with us for a long time.
I have. I've been with the company since the latter part of the 20th century. And I've been with Lord of the Rings Online pretty much from when we first started developing it in 20-something.
Yeah, enough to have a sword and a shield is like kind of an anniversary.
I've got it. They've given me commemorative weaponry for longevity.
All right, to Chris's right is Ryan Penk, game designer, also with us for quite a while and does a lot of Quest and related content for Lothlórien.
Hello, good to be here today.
And then finally is Sarah Libby, currently our office manager for Standing Stone Games, but they also have a long history with the Lord of the Rings Online, including QA work and other bits.
Yep, I started in 2008, and while my title says office manager, I also do QA, copy editing, some dev, office manager, and a little bit of HR, so a lot of hats.
And I should introduce myself. My name is Jerry Snook. I'm the community manager for Standing Stone Games. So for those who aren't familiar, The Lord of the Rings Online was originally published in 2007 and is currently published by the Daybreak Games Company. We're a massively multiplayer online role-playing game set in the literary world of Tolkien's Middle-earth. And you can see that we have quite a bit going on over the course of 15 years. Millions of words in the game. One of the largest explorable worlds in the MMO space, and we've been doing it for a decade and a half at this point. You can kind of see a map here, and I'm going to show you a little bit how, over the course of time, it has developed out.
So yeah, we first started with a small subset of the map, and this is the last decade and a half of my life going by really fast here on the monitor.
What even is time?
To the point where now we've explored pretty much everywhere that the Fellowship and Bilbo went in the core 4 books. But look at how much is still not explored. So there's still a lot of stuff that we can do.
Always room for growth.
Mm-hmm.
So making something as large as Middle-earth is a pretty daunting prospect. We had to start somewhere. How did we decide to start with the story in Angmar?
Well, as you could see at the very beginning of that, there was a small section in the upper left of the map that was the first yellow patch that showed up. That was what we first launched with. It was just a little chunk of what on the maps of Middle-earth is called Eriador. And we started there because Tolkien started there. He started the story off there. The story started fairly small there. It would have been a lot to do the entirety of Middle-earth. It would have been like building Europe in the Middle Ages as opposed to starting out with a small section of Europe and expanding outward. So that part of the map, it made the most sense to do because it's where all of the different peoples of Middle-earth have fairly quiet, peaceful homelands that we could then move into the more troubled areas from. The Shire's up there. There are places where the elves and dwarves live, Rivendell, the Blue Mountains. The men of Bree and the Rangers are up there, and that's how Tolkien introduced people to Middle-earth. So it made sense that we do that as well. The problem was Mordor and all the really big, nasty threats are way at the other corner of that map there in the lower right. So we had to figure out, where the bad guy is going to be, because they didn't really encounter many in the books aside from the Nazgul, who were up there on vacation anyway. But fortunately, Tolkien, one of the great things about doing this game is Tolkien left a lot of breadcrumbs that we could then pick up and build story with. And one of them was the brief mention in the books, and then more in the appendices of the Witch King's realm of Angmar, up there, sort of in the top center of the map, which was a large evil kingdom that was pretty much primed to come back and rise again as in our storyline, as the Dark Lord's forces reasserted their power. It gave us a place to give the players to go to face an evil that the Fellowship was not able / around to go face themselves while they went on the ring quest. So it gave us a chance to tell a story about a villain about a set of villains that were the player's own and not the Fellowship's.
Yeah, the Nazgul in the beginning, when you see them for the first time, are really scary. It was like, oh, this isn't going to go well.
So this was a chance to do stuff involving allies of the Nazgul that the players could actually defeat themselves, because the Nazgul obviously are kind of spoken for in the story, and they're not characters that the players could face very much over the course of the early part of the game.
Yeah, that's when you run away. We've definitely spent a lot of time just developing the foundations of Middle-earth from the works of Tolkien. And now I get to nerd out a little bit, because one of the essential parts of Tolkien is that he wrote The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings as translations from Western. And so as the localization coordinator, we work really hard to maintain the correct tone and the nomenclature that Tolkien had established. And he wrote a document that is pretty well known as the Nomenclature and on Naming in Middle-earth, I think the title is, that actually lists all of the different ways in which he wanted everything to be named. And he wrote it in part as a response to the Swedish and Dutch translations that happened first. And, one of the examples is he explains Rivendell. And he wasn't entirely pleased with the original translation that they had, so he wrote a whole paragraph about how Rivendell is derived from riven, as in cut apart, and Dell, as in valley. So in German, I apologize for my accent, I'm learning, a Bruchtal, and in French, a Fincombe, they both reflect that. Bilbo, there's different rules for what gets translated. Most of the names of the hobbits are translated for sense, like Bilbo Baggins. And the big rule with Bilbo Baggins and Frodo Baggins, any of the Bagginses, is that it has to reflect the name of Bag End in the translated language. So, for example, in German, it's Bütelsend, and in French, it's cul-de-sac, which was actually suggested by Tolkien. And so Bilbo in French and German is Bilbo Butel, and also Bilbon Sequet in French. We have also, it's important to maintain the tone, but also keep in mind the various challenges, the fun challenges of keeping the right licensing in place while we're using the language and the story. Just like the door of Moria right there, it's a pretty good example of something we watch out for.
Yeah, when we adapted, when we got to doing Moria in our, I guess that was in our second year of release, we discovered upon looking into the rights issues that Tolkien's original artwork was not something that he had licensed along with the texts. Which meant that the image you see there on the lower right, the black and white image, that's the one that comes directly from the book. That's the one that he drew. himself, but we couldn't use that one. But fortunately, he describes it so thoroughly in the course of the book that we were able to take the components of that and make our own version of it that still abides by what he described, which is the color image on the upper left. So you can see that the trees are a different configuration, but they still have the crescent moons that he describes in their shape. Crown of Durin, different shape, still a pointed crown. The stars, there's still 7 of them. They're in a different configuration. They might have a different number of points. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But it's all there. But between that and we have to paraphrase a lot of the text as
Yes.
well for rights purposes.
And
One of the stories I like to tell about licensing issues and the text is when we did the flashback to the Great Alliance, the First War of the Ring. In our Mordor Besieged update, we wanted to introduce Isildur's sons, who, what happened during that story was detailed in the appendices to the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, that was in the appendices.
But their names were not there. Their names are in the Silmarillion, which we don't have access to. So what we ended up doing was, because they were royals and because they were rather important people, and in an army, we wrote it so that the army had given them code names. And so those characters got special code names in the story instead of the names that the fans are familiar with.
Yep. And I think it served the story really well.
Oh, agreed.
In addition to that.
Yeah, you'll find that any adaptation of Tolkien can only really pull directly from Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, because those were the rights that Tolkien made available for sale during his lifetime. Everything that was published posthumously, from the Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales, the histories, all the way up to the Fall of Numenor that's coming out this fall, is excellent background material that no one can reference directly. So that makes it a bit of a challenge as well, because you can sort of point into the distance, but not actually say directly what happens in those books.
But we still have a lot of fun with our adaptations, and it's not all just challenges.
Oh yeah, no, like our process of sort of approaching new updates is a joy in itself. So we basically come up with a document called a region personality document that covers whatever area we're deciding to focus on next. In the case of like Mordor Besieged and Minas Morgul, we would have a document covering like that period of the war and what's going on in Minas Morgul and the surrounding areas at the point in the story that we're at. Going from there, the world team would begin work on crafting the landscape, and the content team would begin work on fleshing out the quests in the area. We have our epic story that's kind of the main through line that guides you through each area and normally features like the core moments from the Lord of the Rings story, core characters, like major story beats. And then we have our sort of side quests that we can use to fill in a lot more of the details of the different areas we go to, which gives us a really nice opportunity to tell smaller stories in that context, but not necessarily as pegged exactly to the books as the epic story is.
Yeah, one of the fun things about working, I'm the one who usually ends up writing the region personality docs, which tend to become these 20,000 word sprawling things.
Yeah, I was going to say, this isn't a one sheet here.
Yeah,
These
these are lengthy histories embellishing on what Tolkien wrote, and sort of synthesizing every possible reference, like if it's the War of the Last Alliance, trying to figure out not just who Gil-galad and Elendil are, but who's leading, were the Northmen involved, who might have been leading them. What role did the dwarves of Khazad-dûm actually play in that war? A lot of stuff that we're going to see, also done this fall in the show. It's going to be interesting to see how they take that on as well. But when I write the region personality doc, the idea is to take everything that Tolkien ever did about that and add our spin to it and be able to hand it off to the content designers so that they have a full thing that they can consult without having to go pouring through different footnotes and the appendices themselves. I'm basically the sacrificial lamb there. But one of the fun things about that is finding, again, all the breadcrumbs that Tolkien leaves behind. One of the things that you learn as a Tolkien fan is there are a billion characters in those books. Some of whom we meet thoroughly, some of whom we wonder what their background is. Some of them are mentioned once and then never mentioned again. And our job is to figure out who all these people are and make the players care about them and get them involved in all of their stories. So, for instance, when we were first developing Rohan, we realized we really needed a character who was going to guide the players into Rohan, be sort of the person who introduces them to a lot of the minor lords and eventually, is a gateway to them meeting Theoden and Éomer and all of the major figures. We cast about through the text trying to figure out who this character was going to be. And I don't remember who it was who said, "What about Horn?" It was probably Jeff, who was our lead epic story writer.
But
Horn is mentioned literally once in a poem that was written long after the Battle of Pelennor Fields as one of the guys who died there, and that's the only thing we ever hear about him. It's like and there fell, I'm paraphrasing, but
Yeah.
There fell Herubrand and Herathara and Horn.
And that's
then,
it.
Okay, Horn,
Yeah.
great,
Just the
great,
name.
Dead.
fantastic. But that gave us a way to, okay, now we have a character that we know we're going to be able to have an emotional moment with in the future because we know he dies badly, which is always an exciting way to get players to care about someone.
yeah.
But it allowed us to integrate our story in with Tolkien's by having a character that wasn't just our creation, but was building off of stuff that he did, and then have him carry through all of Rohan into Gondor, finally to fall or not at the Battle of Pelennor.
Yeah.
I really love Horn's story. He ends up, during this quest line that the player follows, Horn ends up in a romantic relationship with the Dunlending woman. They get pregnant, and then Horn goes off to battle. And at one point, much earlier in the game, the player makes a decision, and that decision decides later whether or not Horn dies in battle, as in the text, or he abandons his post. The player is told to report him as dead, and then he and his wife get to go live happily ever after.
So either way, he's listed as dead in the
Yep.
Yes.
in the great roster of fallen heroes.
Yep.
But in one of the possible outcomes in our game, you actually get to save him from the from being slain at Pelennor.
Yeah, because we have all of these epic battles, and we still want people to feel like they are living in Lord of the Rings or in the region that they are. They might actually leave the Shire, unlike me.
Yeah, like some of the challenges we face come down to like quests and presenting like how does the player actually touch the story of Lord of the Rings, because a lot of the things in the story are so like thoroughly defined that like these are the characters that are present, this is what happens, and this is how it goes.
And no one else must know.
So we kind of have to get around that because we want you to be able to interact with the story in specific scenes from the text. So we've managed that by doing a couple different things. We've done flashbacks in like solo like quest story instances, we call them, where you're able to like hear the story and sort of be present for it even if you weren't. We have a thing called session play where you basically log into another character, essentially, while playing your original character. But you take on that character. Like, for instance, one of them, you play like a dwarf steward who's present when Durin's Bane is unearthed. And you're just going about your... Oh, yeah, the Balrog. And you're just kind of going about your day job as a servant of one of the Durin kings of Moria. and you're present when, oh no, everything's going to go wrong. And you have your own little skill set and everything that you're able to work with. And more recently, we tried a player insert form where it wasn't an instance, it was a landscape area, like a normal questing zone, where we sort of put you in the shoes of a certain character. As Sarah mentioned earlier, we had the Mordor Besieged flashback to the War of the Last Alliance, where you play as a soldier of Gondor, but you're still able to play your actual character, and we just sort of let you play there with the assumption that everyone is seeing you as a soldier of Gondor.
Yeah, we're not going to say whether or not there's a surprise Balrog in that one, though.
And we did the same thing last year. Was it only last year?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think
Time's
so.
gotten weird.
Yeah, when we presented the
but
Battle of Azanul.
Azanul Bazaar, we were able to bring the battle where Thorin became the Oakenshield to life. Again, that's covered a lot in the appendices of the books and obliquely in the text, so that was a challenge to assemble everything together and figure out who was in charge of all the different dwarf houses who were fighting there, and what order the various dwarves. Again, there's a long roster of dwarves who die in that battle, and figuring out how they died, where they died, why, whether they were. Who killed them?
Yeah, and there's one who doesn't, Nar, so it was interesting to flesh out his story more as well.
I feel I might be remiss if I didn't have us bring up a little bit about how we deal with the scale of battle in the Lord of the Rings Online.
Yeah, we benefited a lot from starting the story where we did back in Eriador, because it gave us a lot of runway before we got to the big battles like Helm's Deep and the Battle of Pelennor Fields and the Battle of the Black Gate. So a lot of the time we had in that space was spent sort of figuring out how are we going to deliver this to players. Back in the Rise of Isengard expansion in, I believe it was 2011, we experimented with an instance in the Gap of Rohan where we introduced what later became known to us as distant battle units, which were basically these distant fields of enemies that really you wouldn't want to get too close to because they were kind of like pixel people in a way. But at a distance, it felt right. Like it sold that it was a big battlefield. As we got further into Helm's Deep, we sort of blended that with the epic battle system that we created. And then by the time of Pelennor Fields, we developed a thing that we called war walls, which were essentially set dressing of various like orcs and men fighting on the battlefield, which we then used a couple places going forward, like in Azanul Bazaar and in the Gundabad expansion, to sort of help flesh out the conflicts that were going on in those as well.
But it's not all battles. You can't have battles all the time. Like, while we're working on Middle-earth and refining it, we do have time for some more lighthearted plot lines. Like I'm sorry, I'm a big fan of Bingo Boffin.
Who wants to talk about
Bingo?
Oh,
I could talk about Bingo.
We love Bingo.
You have a little bit on
ahead.
Bingo as well, but Bingo Boffin, for folks that don't know, was a sort of pseudo-epic companion, like an epic story companion in Lotro, where it brought you through, I think, levels like 8 to 93, roughly. Originally, it rolled out as a weekly serial where you'd get one quest per week, and there were 52 quests, so it was a solid year of content adventuring with Bingo Boffin. And he would basically just take you around to different places that we had already fleshed out in the meantime. And it was a much lighter-hearted story than a lot of the stuff that crops up in the epic.
I named Bingo.
Did you?
I did, yeah. I was talking with the designer that wrote the content, and he was bouncing the idea off me, and I suggested Bingo for the name as an homage to Frodo's original name, which was Bingo. Bingo Baggins. We didn't use Baggins for this, but originally Frodo was going to be Bingo, but Professor Tolkien's wife convinced him that Bingo was not a great name.
It's a great name.
Thank you.
Well, we thought it was a great name.
The Bingo Boffin storyline, it's a favorite of a lot of people because Bingo is sort of kind of like an affable doofus who gets into misadventures, and it's all very. It's not dire world-ending kind of stuff. It's very
You spend a long time befriending a cat.
Yeah. It's picaresque adventures sort of alongside the rest of it. It allows us to, one of the things that Tolkien is very famous for his extremely world-shaking stuff, but there's also a huge degree of whimsy and humor in the books, particularly in the early parts when they're still in the Shire. The first chapter I just reread it to my kids not too long ago, and the first chapter of Fellowship is practically a comedy. It's so humorously written, and so we wanted to bring an element of that into the game in parallel with as things were getting increasingly dire, and we were pushing the characters on toward Mordor. We wanted the player to have a chance to go back and have this sort of palate cleansing experience with Bingo.
Yeah, and he's cropped up a few times since, usually around festivals and in our more recent expansion of the Shire called the Yonder Shire.
Yeah, and he's very much it's a very Hobbit adventure experience, so I have to encourage everyone to go check it out.
Yeah, it's the kind of adventures that Bilbo and company might have gone on if Gandalf had never come along to muck everything up for them.
All right, so in the game, we have passed the point where the ring has been destroyed. How do we keep the stakes high now that that's done?
Well, we don't. I mean, it's all done, right? I mean,
No. No is the answer to that.
Can I go home now?
No.
The fact of the matter is, Sauron's dead. Big whoop. We took out the evil Dark Lord that was the existential threat to Middle-earth. But existential threats go away, but evil still remains. And even in Mordor, this was actually our chance to allow the players to go into Mordor without it becoming either an instant death situation for them or an instant why didn't Sauron find out about Frodo as a result kind of situation for us. So when we did Mordor, we decided we would show the ring drop because how can you not? And you get to play that as one of those session play instances. But Mordor itself, our Gorgoroth expansion was after the destruction of Barad-dûr and the fall of Mount Doom, when if you remove someone with the kind of power that Sauron had in the kind of realm that Mordor had, if there's anyone left alive, there's going to be people scrabbling for power. His warlords who survived the war are all going to have their own agendas. They're all going to want to try to control some part or all of his holdings. So there's actually a lot of opportunity to tell stories of the evil side of Middle-earth. Once Sauron is gone, the opportunities multiply. So we have the mouth of Sauron is involved in the story. He's still around. The guy who was supposed to be in charge of the armies but annoyed Sauron enough that he got taken off duty and replaced by the mouth of Sauron is there. Oops. His chief assassin, the Weeping Warrior that we invented as a character, and who's been doing a lot of his background work, weakening kingdoms elsewhere in Middle-earth, he's now a major figure. The vampire woman who's secretly been breeding plagues and poisons for him is there's all kinds of there's all kinds of opportunity for interesting characters that, number one, the players couldn't face Sauron anyway. They couldn't, and if they did, there's no way they're defeating Sauron in a direct battle because that's not what Sauron's about. Sauron is supposed to be the undefeatable foe who's taken out by the most minuscule of people. So this gave us an opportunity to show how all of his minions would actually react to suddenly having their shot at glory with both him and the Nazgul removed from the table.
And they're all really nasty pieces of work, but And that's really, it's always fun to flesh out a villain, but we've found other ways to expand and keep our lore authentic in this established space. Like the stout axes are a great example of something that we managed to put together.
Yeah, as part of the fall of Sauron and Gorgoroth sort of falling into disarray, we had the chance to introduce a race of dwarves that were servants of Sauron within Mordor that basically, now that Sauron was gone, they were trying to figure out their place in the world with him no longer being present. They actually began life, for folks that don't know, they're a playable character race now, but they actually began life as just a storyline in Mordor based off a footnote in one of those personality documents that we had. And we were like, well, wouldn't it be interesting to explore that? And we came up with a really strong background for them, basing them as sort of like a splinter of one of the 7 houses of the dwarves. And then after we finished Mordor and we're moving on to future updates, there was a desire in the team to sort of create a different playable dwarf race, and we thought that they would be like an incredible choice for that. And they fit in by escaping from Mordor when Gollum escapes from Barad-dûr, escaping all the way to the Blue Mountains, and then realizing that evil has sort of followed them all the way there, and the choice they have to make is to turn around and face it, essentially. Going beyond that, fleshing out that race of dwarves has given us a chance, along with fleshing out another one of the houses of the dwarves, the J.R.R, gave us a really strong foundation for how we presented things in Azanulbazar and in the Gundabad expansion by giving that sort of interplay of politics between different groups of dwarves.
Yeah, we just last year finished a multi-year post-War of the Ring arc that involves the houses of the dwarves in the north and their attempts to both reclaim some of the parts of the Grey Mountains that were lost to the dragons, and ultimately find their way to the fortress of Gundabad, which the orcs have controlled since more or less since the Second Age. And like Ryan said, we were able to bring in some of the other houses of the dwarves that Tolkien, again, briefly mentions. They appear a little bit more in some of the supplemental stuff that we can't use.
Yep.
But for the most part, we know that there are 7 houses of the dwarves. We only really meet 1, maybe 3, depending on how you count the ones from the Blue Mountains. And there's all these other houses from the east that we know nothing about. And so we were able to bring in the J.R.R. We couldn't use their actual name from the text because that's not in the stuff that anyone has the rights to. But they would have their own name that isn't English anyway. So great.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then the Cambrada, who are the other ones from
The stout axes became
all
essentially
but wiped out by Sauron, and most of their people were taken into thraldom in Mordor and became the stout axes.
Yeah, and we've done that too with characters that have a little less of a tragic backstory. I know that one of the favorite races I like to play are the Bjornings, which are based off of Bjorn.
Oh yeah, and the way we there's an interesting conversation to be had about how continuity and immersion works in MMOs around the Bjorning, also around most character classes that experience the story. But the way we approached the Bjorning was that's a really distinct Tolkien type of character, the folk that can shape change into bears. Having that as a playable class was a really a cool thing to have. We have them start up with their family and venture out into the world as sort of the only Bjorning going on that adventure. Problem being that you're playing an MMORPG, and obviously you're going to see other Bjornings. So I think there's an interesting conversation to be had about like narrative immersion, where you are the one character in the story, and then sort of like the immersion and continuity of the game world itself, where it's like you're gonna bump into people that are also the main character, and like I think you just kind of have to reconcile that as you're playing through it, because every character is the main character of the epic story.
Turns out our theory was sort of that if it's fun, the players aren't going to mind the dissonance as long as they're be able to be a heroic bear person. Turns out we were kind of right about that. Their
Warnings gave us a lot of opportunity for fun bear puns.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I never make bear puns, barely. I mean, but really, I think we all kind of agree too, is that one of the most awesome things about working on this game is not that we just get to tell our stories, but we help the players to tell theirs. And the player community is just, I'm just going to be honest, it's just awesome. It's really great.
For those who aren't aware, for example, we have a community-run concert called Weathertop. It's a gigantic live concert that takes place on the top of Weathertop. It's happened 14 years now, every summer. And it's a huge opportunity where hundreds of Lothlórien players get together to not just play and perform music, but also watch and be a part of the audience. It has a real concert feel to it, although it's in a virtual space like Lord of the Rings Online.
And this is a completely player-organized and player advertised, and like this is we never intended for that to happen.
I'm pretty sure the stock response when we first found out that it was they're doing what, because we built Weathertop. Weathertop was a nightmare for us to build, and we never expected it would turn into this amphitheater where they where you can see that in the center image there. There's one of the many bands that plays there. This is them playing, I think, in Breed, because they tour too.
Yeah.
But our music system allows people to play, multi-character bands to orchestrate their own music, to play them and play it all in sync. And we thought, this was kind of just a fun, like, knock-around thing that one of our designers did back in the day when we were first developing this. And the players just took it and ran with it. And they next thing we know, there's what? Do you remember any of the names of the major bands?
No,
that
I
play?
don't.
No, but another thing that players have really latched on to, and we see it quite a lot, is just the housing as well. Because like you can go live in the Shire.
Who wouldn't want to live in the Shire?
I'm not excited about that.
Recently, you can go live in the Lonely Mountain, which the players are really digging as well. And you can decorate your house with all of the trappings that you find over the course of your adventures. We always make sure that whenever we're introducing a new area, that we allow players to essentially take home souvenirs from that and put them up either outside their house on the lawn or in their parlor or what have you.
Yeah,
And I feel like we'd be remiss not to mention that we also have like theaters and lecture halls
that people.
I mean, once we found out that the players were doing these concerts, it became an exercise when we were making new areas. Like when I planned out Minas Tirith, I deliberately set aside. I said, these two spots are theaters. Nobody do anything in there. Nobody put any content in there. The players will take care of it. So we've got one outdoor space, one indoor space, and like I hoped would happen, the players moved in and they've been putting on just giant. They put on musicals in these things.
It's amazing.
And non-musical plays too. It's not all. But and they put on stories that they make of their own, both within the Middle Earth experience and also goofy stuff that they do that's sort of extra to it.
And we always have things like the festivals, but we like to take whatever excuse we can to celebrate in game, and also.
Oh, and one other thing I wanted to bring up was the lecture hall. A Tolkien professor that I work with fairly regularly. I have a bunch of people that I can call. That's like, I need a Quenya guy who can translate something into Quenya for me. But one of the professors that I work with came to us and said, "I'd like to do a series of lectures in Middle Earth about the game, about the books, and about the game and how it relates to the books." And I said,
That's
I was
pretty
like, "When do you
awesome.
need a space to do that?" Because I have a few spare days, so I built him a lecture hall in Bree. And over the course of months, they just had to put on one
In-game.
lecture after another in game that any player could go into and listen to a professor of the world that they're pretending to be in talk about it like it's sort of real, but also sort of like it's
That's pretty
yeah.
epic.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, speaking of celebrations, we did want to come here and make a little bit of an announcement. So, you can see on this next slide our next expansion that we're happy today to announce. It'll be Update 34, a mini expansion called Before the Shadow. It's going to be a new experience from levels 1 to 30. It'll have a new 6-person instance and a new delving difficulty system. We'll have 4 new books for new characters, the regions of Swanfleet and Cardolan, a new skirmish, and a whole lot more. We're going to have a whole lot more to say about Before the Shadow in the coming days and weeks, so keep an eye out on Lothlórien.com and social media for more information.
Show the scary picture.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a scary picture. Oh
And
no!
I've been super excited to go back up into Eriador
Yeah.
and do some more work up there, because it's allowed us to go back to some of the parts of Tolkien's background story that we haven't been able to visit, including like the fall of the kingdom of Cardolan, which was destroyed by the Witch King in the middle of the Third Age. Gave rise to the haunting of the Barrow Downs, and also Swanfleet is the area adjacent to where the Rings of Power were forged. So there's we got to revisit the ruins of the Elf Kingdom of Eregion as well. So that's just been fun to go back and add on to some of the stuff that we did years and years ago.
I'm really excited.
Me too.
Yeah. Oh, this is less scary. That's just Shadowfax. Look how happy Shadowfax is.
This is a time for question and answers. We do have about 10 minutes here to take some Q&A. So do we have someone from the audience with the microphone that might be available? While you're getting set up and such, let's have the first question from the chat room. We do have this live streamed as well. And that is, how do we navigate the waters between new players discovering us through other productions, but needing to remain separate due to licensing restrictions? So I'm guessing they're asking about other video games, other television shows, coming to Lothlórien from that. And how do we navigate those waters in terms of introducing them to Middle-earth?
That's a tough question.
It is, I guess just kept thinking, in some ways it's a marketing thing, right?
I think to a certain extent it's that we've had our own voice for the game for a long time, and obviously there are tons of adaptations of Lord of the Rings, but I think our longevity as a game has sort of been in part due to the strength of our storytelling and our take on the world. Also the fact that it's just a very contiguous landscape, so I think it hits the sort of exploration that people are looking for in Middle-earth in a really specific way that maybe isn't represented in all adaptations.
Yeah, it's easy to go and go out and find characters from the books.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say how excited I was to find Tom Bombadil, but
And we always welcome, no matter where people have, whatever their history of Lord of the Rings and Middle-earth, whether they're a Tolkien scholar or just someone who maybe watched the movie once. If they want to play our game, we welcome them with open arms and try to.
And if you're a fan of the books and have missed certain locations and characters and events that the process of adaptation to a movie or a TV show or a cartoon, and if you're talking about the Rankin Bass stuff. A lot of stuff has to get trimmed. One of the fun things about doing an MMO is we've been able to basically put all of it in there. And so if you want to meet Erkenbrand or Imrahil or go to the Stone of Eric or see the battle against the Corsairs at Pelargir and all this stuff that readers know well from the books, but what had to be trimmed out for various adaptations. Bombadil's another example of that. It's all there. Glorfindel, you get to meet Glorfindel and do a lot with Glorfindel, actually.
Yeah. Let's take a question from the audience here. Do we have someone? I think I saw you with your hand up, and then you will be second. Yep.
This one kind of requires a preparation, so the new expansion is basically a rework of the early game.
Yes, it's supplemental to it. It's an alternate path.
Well, I can first of all say that I'm definitely going to check that one out. But how do you manage the difficulty of retaining the long-term players who've already hit level 140 and now want to continue, and you just give them something that seems so incredibly weak in comparison, in terms of pure numbers?
Sure. I think part of the answer to that question is the breadth of content that we'll be offering in Before the Shadow. While we do have that epic, or that book series as well, and the lands we just discussed, there is endgame content associated with this as well, in terms of a skirmish and an instance. In this
And there'll be
case.
more revealed. It's a surprise.
Yeah.
You
And we
can't
have,
ruin
exactly.
a
There's a lot I
surprise.
can't say yet. But,
Yeah.
but I think to answer your question, it is tricky to both make sure we preserve this experience that we're looking to do while also maintaining an end game at the same time. And it's one of the things that I think when Before the Shadow, beyond Before the Shadow, we'll be returning probably with a focus more end game
It will be a
specific to help cover that.
But it will be all revealed in time.
Well, I mean, one thing that we've found too is a lot of our players are excited to go back and revisit stuff with from a new angle in parts of the world that they haven't been to, that they have been to before. In addition to pushing outward with the end game, so we have plans for where to push the end game in the coming years. But it felt like a good opportunity this year to bring it back home for a little bit while we get ready to do that.
Right. I see you've had your hand up a couple of times now, so let me make sure I get you an opportunity here.
Swillard.
Yeah.
So when the game first released, it had a subscription model.
Mm-hmm.
So to what extent, if even, did the change of the monetization model change the game design or even the lore of the game?
I can talk, for those who don't know, we did start in 2007 as a subscription-based game, and a few years later we went free to play, and we've been doing that ever since. I guess I'm going to ask, does it really have much impact on the story?
It doesn't affect
I don't
the
think
lore
it
at all.
affects the story at all.
Yeah.
No, I mean we didn't want to mess with too much with how we developed new regions, because we wanted the players to still have the experience that they'd come to enjoy of when we open up a new section of the world, of having an epic story that they can experience, as well as the smaller the smaller, more regional quest lines. Even the size of the regions didn't really change too much. I think
it's
some of them got a
comparable.
little larger, I'd say, but that was mainly because we gave people horses that they could ride around on, not because of the change in the pricing model.
Yeah. And we have a lot of really cool mounts too.
Yeah. And the main thing, of course, it did is bring in, a ton of players, so going free to play. Do we have any other questions in the room? I see someone there. Yeah. Over there on the right, I don't know if you can see. There we go.
Hi, I have a two-part question. So the first part is, we all have our moments of insecurity, and how do you handle this when you expand or change the works of someone as big as Tolkien? So how do you handle it personally? And then my second part would be, if you had the chance to talk to Tolkien, what would you like to show him, or what would your questions be?
Oh, wow.
boy.
Oh,
Wow.
man.
Okay.
I'm lucky.
Well, clearly,
like-
the answer to the first one is blinding arrogance. I think,
Yeah. or it's.
No, actually, it's the exact opposite. It's we from the start we've approached it with trying to stay as loyal, bearing in mind that it's a game and you have to do certain things to make it a fun game that a bunch of people can play. to try to keep it as true to the spirit of Tolkien and his story as possible, and that's why we try not to deviate in any major way from the tale he tells. So and that gets down to thematic elements. As we expand new areas, we expanded the dwarf the dwarfed content that we just recently put out. We asked ourselves constantly, what themes were important to Tolkien particularly with the Longbeard dwarves and their constant losing of homes and the decline of them. Am I crackling? I feel like I'm crackling.
Just switch.
You-
So we tried to keep the themes intact.
And we're all kind of, I mean, I guess we could admit it. We're all kind of big Tolkien fans, and so in a lot of times we're sitting here and we're geeking out about all the little bits that we can find. I mean, I'm geeking out about all the language stuff, but we do spend a lot of, especially Chris, but we spend a lot of time just like going, oh wow, look at this that we found.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone have a thing they'd want to ask Tolkien?
I honestly don't. I think he was a master storyteller, and I would just want to sit and listen to him tell stories.
Can I buy you a pint?
Yeah.
All right, well, we have just a couple minutes left. I think there might be room for one more question. If anyone is feeling like asking it, go ahead. Let me just say we will be available afterwards as well. We'll be outside those doors if you do have any further questions you'd like to mention. We do have a meetup that we'll be doing on Thursday. You could find out more about that over on our website, lotro.com. The name is skipping my brain.
It's a
Legends or
Legends.
Legacy?
Wait, no,
right?
it's Legacy.
Yeah,
Legacy at
okay,
Hyatt.
Yeah, Legacy Hyatt. So maybe we'll see some of you there. And I did bring a couple of T-shirts here with me. So if you happen to be a Lord of the Rings online player and think you might want one, come see me after the presentation here.
They're a little scary though.
All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up here then. Make sure people get time for the next session. So I did want to thank Marcy, Chris, Ryan, and Sarah for being with us today, and thank everyone in the audience and everyone virtually online for being here as well. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.